Last time, we left off right after the Battle of Edgehill, with the English Civil War just getting started. Today, we raid diving back into the heart of the conflict to uncover the untold stories of the ordinary men who fought it. After Edgehill, things really escalated. The parliamentarians knew they needed an edge, and they found it in a man named Oliver Cromwell. He was a force of nature, driven and determined. He started building something England had never seen before, the New Model Army. This wasn't just a collection of fighters, it was a disciplined, professional, and highly motivated force. The soldiers, many of whom were Puritans, believed they were fighting a righteous war, and that belief made them formidable. This army would become the turning point. The year is 1644, and we're at the Battle of Marston Moor. This was a massive, brutal clash. Imagine the scene: thousands of men on a vast field, air thick with smoke, and the sound of cannons and muskets. The Royalists, the king's men, were confident, but Cromwell and his New Model Army were about to change everything. In a stunning and decisive victory, the parliamentarians crushed the Royalist forces. But who were the men who won this battle? They weren't famous generals or noble lords. They were farmers, blacksmiths, and weavers, men like the ones we've been following, whose names had been lost to the history books. They fought with a fierce determination, not for personal glory, but for their families, their homes, and their vision of a better England. They were the true, unsung heroes of Marston Moor, and their bravery turned the tide of the war. As the war dragged on, King Charles I found his power slipping away. His armies suffered one devastating defeat after another. The New Model Army was relentless. By 1646, the king was cornered and had no choice but to surrender. You might think this was the end, but the story was far from over. With the king captured, the victors, the parliamentarians, started to fracture. You see, winning a war is one thing, but agreeing on what comes next is another. Cromwell, who had started as a relatively unknown country gentleman, was now one of the most powerful men in England. He had a radical vision, a new order where the king wouldn't have absolute power. But not everyone in his own camp agreed on how to achieve that. Different factions started arguing, each wanting to shape the future of the nation. The unity that had won them the war was beginning to crumble. Then came the moment that sent shockwaves across England and all of Europe. In January 1649, King Charles I was put on trial for treason. It was unprecedented. A king judged by his own subjects. He was found guilty, and in a public execution, he was beheaded. But what about our soldiers? The men who had risked everything. Many of them had fought not just for political change, but for a dream of a fairer, more just England. They had bled for this new republic. But as Cromwell's rule began, the reality was far from the dream. The country fell into a period of strict military rule and political turmoil. Many soldiers felt betrayed, but even many of the parliamentarian soldiers grew disillusioned. They saw a new kind of tyranny replacing the old one. Some, scarred by the horrors of war, simply tried to return to their homes and rebuild their shattered lives. Others, however, had nowhere to go. They continued to fight, not for grand causes anymore, but simply for survival, hoping for a chance at redemption in a country that seemed to have forgotten their sacrifice. In the final years of the war and the interregnum that followed, Cromwell's Commonwealth started to falter. The deep wounds of the Civil War had not healed. England had gone through a bloody revolution, but the cost was immense. It was the ordinary people, the soldiers who had fought on both sides, who were left to pick up the pieces of their broken lives and a fractured nation. Then, in 1660, the monarchy was restored. Charles II, the executed king's son, returned from exile and was crowned king. It was called the Restoration. We're now on the wrong side of history. Their sacrifices were ignored, their stories deliberately forgotten, as the nation tried to erase the memory of the Republic. But we shouldn't forget them. These men, the farmers, the apprentices, the forgotten soldiers, were the true backbone of the war. They endured freezing winters, meager rations, and the constant threat of death. They fought through the darkest of times, driven by a belief in something greater than themselves. Has moved you? Please show your support by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and hitting that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. There are still so many more untold stories of these forgotten heroes to uncover, and their sacrifices deserve to be remembered. Thank you for watching.